know that there are, just like the School Safety Commission and Chair May had just discussed, there are a variety of programs and looking at mental health and things that the School Safety Commission has been working on and this committee has been looking at. We believe that the best way to protect America's children from school shootings is to pass gun safety laws that prevent people with dangerous histories from getting a gun. Right? We know that things like background checks not only have, according to PAC poll in 2017, I believe it was, 2018, showed that 97% of Americans support background checks on gun sales. Federal law obviously only requires licensed gun dealers to conduct background checks, which means that we have millions of guns in this country a year that are exchanged without a background check through things like the internet. In some states, as many as 1 in 10 people seeking guns in unlicensed sales online have prohibited records. And then something that has gained some traction even here in Arkansas, and there's been a discussion I know, are these red flag laws, which you'll hear a little bit about today, I think a little bit further, which we've supported in various places. It's just been incredible momentum and bipartisan support on this. Before Parkland happened in February, there were only 5 states that had red flag laws. Now there are 13, so 8 states passed them since February, 4 of those with Republican governors. And basically red flag laws are a way for a family member or law enforcement to petition a court to temporarily restrict access to firearms if somebody is a danger to themselves or others, with due process protections and what we believe is respect for the Second Amendment and the due process of that person. We kind of see it as addressing 3 buckets. Not only can it keep guns out of the hands of mass shooters, it also has a hand in school safety. In Florida, in the wake of Parkland, Florida passed a red flag law. We've seen it used multiple times, and multiple times specifically for people who have said that they were going to go and basically commit an active shooting at a school. Florida authorities were able to use a red flag law to temporarily restrict access to firearms in those cases, which I think hopefully we can agree, taking somebody with dangerous history or that is making overt threats and temporarily restricting that access with due process protections can be important in reducing the risk of an active shooter. And then thirdly, which has been an epidemic across the country and even here in Arkansas, is that red flag laws can address suicides. Actually, Everytown today just came out with a study that said that firearm suicide, talking about the specific demographic that we're talking about here, children and teens, firearm suicide has increased 61% in the past decade among children and teenagers. It's a startling number. And 86% of firearm suicides involve men and white men in rural areas, which is another startling number, which something that we think that something like a red flag law can address. Of course, there are other gun violence prevention policies, domestic violence, and making sure that domestic abusers who are convicted of misdemeanors are subject to restraining orders and prohibited from purchasing, raising the age of purchases for assault weapons, which you'll hear today. And we feel that these are common sense ways that something that legislators can do right now, as we look at a comprehensive school safety discussion, something that legislators and legislatures can do right now to increase school safety. And so again, in closing, and I'll see if Eve has anything else to add here, but we're asking that as you look and make any recommendations as a clearinghouse for what will happen in session, that you not expand the arming of teachers through the CSSO program or another program. Consider some of these gun violence prevention measures that we talked about, and I know that there's been discussions around right now, and add some transparency to the arming of teachers so that when districts opt in, communities can get involved in that process. And I hope that as we continue this discussion that you will use us as a resource in this discussion, and so that we can be part of this going forward and hopefully give you resources and materials that will help you as you look at this critical issue that's happening not only here but across the country.
We have been following the School Safety Commission very closely. We've had a member at every single School Safety Commission meeting. And we believe that once a school shooter is inside the school, we've already failed those kids. We've got to do something proactive to keep from having to react. And since the initial report of the School Safety Commission was filed in July, or announced in July, we've seen multiple school districts say, okay, well, that's a recommendation, we're going to arm teachers. And some parents have reached out to me saying that they found out about this via a newsletter, and at the bottom of a newsletter in the middle of summer saying, oh, by the way, we're going to arm teachers now. Some parents found out at school on back to school night, a big sign saying, don't worry, all of our teachers are packing now. And parents have a right to know if there's going to be guns in their children's schools. There needs to be a more transparent process for when schools do choose to opt in, because a lot of parents do not want their kids anywhere near an armed teacher, and a lot of teachers do not want to be near other armed teachers. So thank you again for hearing from us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know I have lots of questions. A couple different things. When you're talking about the suicides, you're saying that the red flag law would help prevent suicides, and could you repeat what you said about the statistic about rural white men?
Yeah, so we came out with a study today that showed that 86% across the country, this is, of firearm suicide victims are men, and we see that there is especially a tie there in rural areas, where in many states there's been a real increase in suicides in rural areas.